Hey guys, welcome back to Telltale. I'm Emily.
I'm Greg.
And today we're going to be talking about our namesake, Telltale Heart,
Yes,
by Edgar Allan Poe.
we chose that for the name of our book's business because the black cat was already taken.
Yes.
So we went with this one. It makes sense though.
Mm-hmm.
Telltale Heart was published in a magazine called The Pioneer in 1843, which is the same year that The Black Cat was published. Telltale Heart was published first. It's a very short story, 4 pages long.
Yeah,
in
it's
my
really
book.
short. I literally just read it before we recorded.
She's
Literally.
read it before.
Well, yeah, I have read it before. I just needed a refresher.
Neither of us has ever read it before. We just read it
Just
seconds
now.
before starting
Seconds
the camera.
before,
and
no.
we have no clue what we're doing.
No, I read this back in high school, but I just needed a refresher to make sure I told the synopsis correctly.
Yeah, I read it in high school too, along with all of his other most important stories. We went through all of them.
Yeah.
Fall of the House of Usher, Black Cat, Mask of the Red Death, all of those. And so I had to reread this to prepare for this, but I reread it a couple of weeks ago and took notes.
I forgot we were doing it.
Oh. Okay, so
My bad.
you want to do the synopsis.
Yeah, so basically, this guy is creeping on this old man with intentions to murder him, basically. And the old man has this really strange, dead eye, basically, that really disturbs the murderer. And so one night he decides to kill the guy and cover him up under the floorboards. But, as some people were coming to investigate because a neighbor was telling them they heard weird noises and sounds and a scream, he starts hearing the heartbeat under the floorboards. But the other guys don't seem to hear it, but it's just driving him insane as he keeps hearing it get louder and louder and louder and louder. So eventually he just, spoiler alert, tells everybody, yeah, I did it. You can't possibly not hear the heart beating under the floorboards. Rip it open. And that's kind of where it ends, where he kind of gets caught having done this murder. After plotting for a while. He kept, it's for several nights apparently, he's just creeping in this guy's bedroom. Or waiting for him to fall asleep, and the eye still stares. But
yeah, he wanted to kill the guy because he just couldn't stand that eye.
Yeah, just
he
because
liked the
it's
old
so
man,
yeah, it was just so superficial.
The eye just drove him so nuts that he had to kill the old man, even though he liked him, and the old man was letting him live for free in his house.
Sick pervert, weirdo.
Yeah, so he was definitely unhinged.
Yeah.
The whole story very much parallels the Black Cat. It's like the same story, just instead of a cat, you got a heart.
Yes, or and still the eye. The eye is consistent between the two stories. There's one thing. It's just so strange that he paralleled these so much.
And so that made it really interesting to me that it was written in the same year, months apart. Which makes sense because of the fact that they are so much alike. It's like he was just trying to write stuff to get it published and get some money, and so he was regurgitating ideas. But he did a brilliant job with both. Great opening line to this story, which I've got here. True, nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am, but why will you say that I am mad? Even when he's giving his confession, he doesn't understand that he's off his rocker. But even though he's insane, the whole thing is very premeditated. So he's not not guilty by reason of insanity. He's very definitely guilty. He plotted this. He planned it.
It was very prepared.
He took elaborate measures to make sure this was going to be the perfect crime, and in the end, it's only his own guilt, his soul being consumed by the guilt of what he did, that led him to burst out his confession.
And what's interesting to me is we don't understand fully why this old man let him live at his house, really, other than... So it could be that, and we don't know the relationship between him and the old man either. We don't know if they're friends, if he's, the old man's a friend of the family, anything like that. But the fact that he's basically living with this guy rent-free, as far as we know, kind of insinuates that he is not well enough to perhaps hold a job and pay rent. Like there's something going on where he's definitely an unwell person or just really good at manipulating situations.
But that's something Poe does all the time, like in the Pendulum, where you don't get much backstory.
No.
The story really focuses on the psychological circumstance that's going on in this short period of time.
Yeah. And it is such a short story. It's very vague in detail, other than you just kind of watch. Again, you're watching this guy kind of spiral down, like in The Black Cat. He's spiraling down into this sort of crazed sensation, but it's not the plotting of the murder that causes it per se.
Yeah.
Like he seems pretty he pretty much has like pretty sound mind. Like the whole time plotting like this thing is driving me nuts, or like maybe he's OCD, I don't know, but it just kind of like it spirals downward in such a like it's at first it's very gradual, and then suddenly it's like the ultimate downward plunge.
Yeah.
Where it's post-murder that most of this happens, which is weird because usually you would expect it to be prior to and during the plotting of, but it's all after the murder's done. Like he feels no sense of guilt during the plotting? Really? Like you don't really get a lot of information about that. It's really interesting.
Yeah. But and this isn't one that you can really spoil, because from the very beginning you pretty much know there's going to be a murder. And it happens.
Yeah.
And you pretty much know that he's giving his confession right from the start, that he's heading to the gallows or whatever. So saying what happens in the story doesn't really spoil it. What's great about reading this story, even though you know what the whole story is the masterful way that Poe builds that suspense and builds that tension through the story towards that end. You know what's coming, but you know he just keeps winding that spring tighter and tighter as you go through the story. Edgar Allan Poe pioneered that. Nobody had done that before. He was the master of that sort of thing and started a whole genre off of it.
Yeah. I wanted to show them this cool illustration in this book. I really like it a lot because it's a monochromatic. It's very monochromatic, but the eye has this like kind of blue veil thing going on. It's really, really nicely done.
That's
and
awesome.
That's from this particular version of Edgar Allan Poe's short stories that I have.
Which we've been mining a lot the last few months.
We've been using that a lot. And I like this one. It has an introduction by Neil Gaiman. It's illustrated by Mark Summers, who is just very talented, does kind of like these woodcut etching looking illustrations. They're really neat. So just really nice version to have around. Plus it's nice and big, so like when you're reading it, you've got like this 12-point font everywhere, 14-point font. So it's a really nice one too if you have sight troubles.
Yeah, it is nice to have that. It's just when you're laying in bed, it's better to have something this size that you can easily hang on
This
to.
is like a podium book. Like you need to have a little podium that you can just
that when my arms get tired.
Yeah. I usually just lay like this.
Oh.
Just rest it on me.
Yeah.
And usually my cat lays right behind it, so I've got a little book.
Oh, you got a prop.
It's very
Until
convenient.
The cat moves, yeah.
Very convenient. But I just wanted to show that illustration because I like it because it's using a really great like monochromatic black and white gray tone image, but then that eye just has that little bit of blue in it to differentiate it. It's so nicely done. Very ghostly looking. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, that is a beautiful book. And unfortunately, and I'm getting kind of mad about the book I have. It's supposed to be the complete tales and poems of Edgar Allan Poe, and I'm trying to go through and read everything Poe wrote in order that he wrote it, and I'm coming across all these mostly poems, but now I hit this whole play that's not in the book. It's like, wait a minute, this book isn't complete.
Yeah, there is no complete. There's a play that exists out there.
There's all kinds of stuff that he wrote that's not even in this book.
Yeah, it is kind of frustrating sometimes when you encounter that. Or you think it's like the complete works, but really it's just selected works.
Yeah.
Where it's like the complete works of the most famous ones.
Published by Modern Library, so the original publication of it dates back to, I think, the 1930s or 1940s. So they may have discovered things since then that just weren't in this book back then. So back
It's
then it was
possible.
complete,
Yeah,
and now it's not.
quite possible. Yeah.
So this one's definitely one of the greatest ever written.
Surprising
in American
since
literature.
it is so short.
Yeah.
It is a very short piece,
Well,
but it's really well done.
You know, I hear on YouTube all the time people saying how they hate short stories, they got to have novels, but look into the literature. So many truly masterful works of literature are short. Some very short. Everything O. Henry wrote is super short. A lot of the best works of Ernest Hemingway are short stories.
Yep.
H.G. Wells is mostly known for his short stories and his novels, but lots of short stories. Great science fiction writers like Harlan Ellison.
Yeah.
He did write a couple novels, but most of his output is short stories.
I don't understand why people don't love short stories, especially like in this day and age. I feel like good literature is good literature, and attention spans studies are proving, becoming smaller. So it's nice to still have access to good literature for those people who really struggle to have an attention span for a novel or a 7-book series or anything like that. Like even I struggle with series that are longer than 3 books. If it's more than a trilogy, with the exception of Keys to the Kingdom by Garth Nix and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the trilogy of 5 books. I really have a hard time reading anything that's more than a trilogy. So I think short stories are really underappreciated, especially like when we consider that times are changing. Yes, it is probably frustrating for older generations to realize that there's a younger generation who has a shorter attention span. But a lot of it too is we want to have good literature but have really busy lives. It's not even about an attention span. It's about prioritizing your time during the day and coming up with your daily timeline. And if you only have a lunch break of a half hour and you want to get a good story in, and a novel's just really long to get through, short stories are a great way to do that. Poetry is a really great way to do that. Those are things that I think people are younger generations, I think, are appreciating more than older generations. But I definitely think good literature is good literature. It doesn't matter how long it is.
And poetry is a good example. I've never heard anybody say, I only read epic poems. I won't read haiku. It doesn't happen.
Nobody
so
says
why do
that.
you get people
They
saying
love poems or they don't. So like they love
Yeah.
poetry or they don't love poetry. That's really all it is. That's the only debate there is.
Yeah. You know, so why do we get people saying I only want novels, I don't want to read short stories? Short stories are a specific form that is different from the novel.
If you don't read
because
short
you don't
stories,
have the room to really give it all that development of character and backstory. But something like Telltale Heart that dispenses with that and focuses on what Poe wanted to present in that story, and what the idea he's presenting is small enough that 4 pages does it all.
yes,
It's
you don't
masterful.
need more.
It's brilliant. I love reading stuff like that.
Yeah, and even a detail-oriented person like myself, I love this story, but it's one of those things where it doesn't have a lot of detail, and I love details. I love world building. I didn't need it because it was so well written.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's really what good literature should do. It should defy your preferences even and just blow you away. No matter what your thoughts and feelings are about length or shortness or content, subject matter, it should be able to just really impact you.
Right.
No matter what.
Right.
So,
Okay,
this
so
one did for me.
it's a top tail.
Top tail! Woo! I'm a fan. Awesome. Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about?
Nope.
All right. Short
That's it for this
short
week.
review for a short story. Like,
Yeah.
subscribe, let us know what you think if you like Telltale Heart. Love the parallels between Telltale Heart and the Black Cat. We'd love to discuss that with you too. So we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.